An important factor when your goal is to maximize muscle growth is the frequency of training. And this actually kind of depends on what program you look at, but some will do 3 days or 4 days, 5 days. In my hypertrophy cluster program, I give 3, 4, and 5 day options. But with time and listening to enough smart guys about hypertrophy and experimenting myself, I think 5 days is superior to the 3 day split. Example is, if you look at Mike Israetel's work, he looked at SRA curves, which are stimulus, recovery, adaptation. And every training session you'd stimulate the muscle, and let's say you'd fatigue it, and then it would have to recover before it could adapt to get bigger. So actually you can look at the SRA curves, and a bigger muscle that produces more force will have a longer SRA curve than a smaller muscle. Say like the glutes will produce a lot of force and they'll get fatigued in the workout. They take a lot longer to recover and then longer to adapt. So versus like the shoulders are kind of a smaller muscle group, they don't produce as much force. So you could train shoulders super often. So you look at the SRA curves, and especially for someone that does not produce a lot of force, like if you're weaker and you're smaller, you could train your muscles more often, and you should train them more often. And actually, so that was Mike Israetel's thing, was the SRA curves. And that's pretty huge. That was pretty cool for me to hear about initially, that you could look at Ronnie Coleman and he doesn't have to train. He could train one body part every day of the week and still grow, because every one of his body parts is producing so much force. Now, sure, his legs were producing more than his upper body, but they took so long to recover. He's squatting 800 pounds. What is some kid squatting 100, 200 pounds? Now, there's a lot of other factors. Ronnie Coleman was on drugs like testosterone, and that goes into the next point, that if you're on testosterone or you're on steroids, you're anabolic all the time. And this is something that Christian Thibodeau kind of touched on recently, or I heard about recently. I don't know how recent he wrote about it, but if you're on drugs, you're anabolic all the time. If you're not on drugs, the time that you get anabolic is when you have the training session. So if you simply do more training sessions, like 5 days instead of 3 days, you will be more anabolic more often, which will then probably lead to better muscle growth. So if you pair the two things, you pair the SRA curves, train your muscles more often, and then you pair the idea that you're getting the anabolic signaling every session that you have, 5 days of training is probably going to be better than 3 days if you're looking at maximizing muscle growth. And I'm actually coming out with I'm working on having this new program called the Jacked Fleet. It's about like getting jacked but also getting athletic, and that's going to be 6 or 7 days a week of training. Now when you do train more often, you have to kind of just play with the volume and the intensity to make sure that you're actually recovering, because you want to stimulate, but then you also need to recover before you can adapt. If you're doing these like 3 day a week training, 2 day a week, I don't think you're really maximizing your muscle growth. And if you are able to train more often, I've always been someone that, like, even when initially I just hated having days off, play around with it and train super often. Even if you're doing hypertrophy cluster training, do the 5 days a week, but if you have weak areas that you need to work on, go in on the 6th and the 7th day and work on them. And just make sure that you're able to recover, because ultimately the adaptation is going to lead to your results. So anyways, here's kind of some videos of the week training I did. And I train every day of the week during the weekdays, and then on the weekends I might miss a day, but I'll still I'll go in on a Saturday or a Sunday or both, and I still have a way to recover and adapt to all of these. And that goes back to other factors I talked about earlier, like sleep, I guess getting enough carbs, getting enough proteins, whatever. Anyways, yeah, train more often, you'll probably get better results in hypertrophy.
Metaphor, he was a